In the black mud of a forest in France, 194 men were writing their last letters home. They were surrounded, German soldiers on every ridge, and now, unbelievably, their own artillery was falling on them. Shells meant for the enemy were ripping their own lines apart. There was no radio, no runner could survive. There was a small basket, and inside it was a pigeon. Her name was Cher Ami. In the next 25 minutes, she would be shot out of the sky, blinded in one eye, her leg torn open. However, she would not stop. This is what happened next. It's early October 1918. The First World War is in its final brutal weeks. In the dense Argonne forest,
where they are blowing people up,
an American unit, later called the Lost Battalion, has pushed too far and too fast. They are cut off with no food and no water. Ammo is nearly gone, and above them the skies are screaming. But the shells landing on their heads aren't German. They are American. Friendly fire, because the headquarters has no idea where their battalion is.
How far away from here is the Lost Battalion?
Major Charles, with Lizzie, does the only thing he can. He sends out a pigeon. The pigeon should carry the coordinates and a desperate plea. The plea was, stop the barrage. The bird clears the trees, and immediately the Germans open fire, and the pigeon falls dead. A second bird is released again. The cracks of rifles spirals into the leaves. Now there is only one pigeon left. Her name in French means dear friend. She is small, grey, and remarkable. A bird that should have been forgotten by history. She carries the last piece of paper between 194 men and oblivion. With Lizzie scribbles the message himself. His hands are shaking while writing these coordinates, and then he adds a line that will echo for a century. The note reads, we are along the road parallel to 276.4. Our own artillery is dropping a barrage directly on us. For heaven's sake, please stop it. He ties the message to her leg, and a soldier lifts her into the grey October light. And for a single suspended second, there is only the sound of wings. Then a volley of shots. A German bullet punches through the bird's chest. It tears through the breast muscles and exits through the back. But she keeps flying. Another shot shatters the bones around her right eye. She's now blind on that side, but she keeps flying. A third bullet hits her leg. It is nearly severed, hanging by a tendon. The message capsules dangle from a thread of flesh. Still keeps flying. 25 miles, there is no man's land. Over shattered trees and craters filled with water and the dead, she flies not with instinct, but with something that looks unbearably like a choice. Inside her tiny body, blood is filling lungs, and every bit is pain. And yet she cannot stop, because beneath her in the smoke are 194 men listening to the whistle of shells and praying for a silence that isn't coming. 25 miles in 25 minutes. She arrives at the loft at division headquarters. A soldier there will later write, "She fell from the sky like a stone. She was a mess of blood and feathers. We thought she was dead." They thought she was dead, but she moved. A medic carefully unwounds the message from the ruins of her leg. She reads the word, and the order went out instantly. "Lift the barrage." The shelling stopped. In the sudden ringing silence, the men of the lost battalion heard something impossible. Nothing. Then, of course, the sound of their own breathing. And then, slowly, the realization that they might live. The Pigeon had not just delivered a message. She had carried a final, fragile bridge between life and death. The medics worked on her for hours. They cleaned the chest wound that should have killed her. They removed the destroyed eye, and then they did something extraordinary. They carved her a tiny wooden leg. Against every law of nature, she survived. A few months later, the war ended, but by then the Pigeon was already a legend. She was awarded the French Croix de Guerre, one of the highest honors for bravery. Not for being a bird, but for being a soldier who refuses to fall.
Awarded her the Croix de Guerre, the Rosette de la Resistance, and the Légion d'Honneur, which is a fancy way of saying.
A year later, the Pigeon died of her wounds, and her body was preserved with the greatest care. And now, today, she sits in the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C. If you ever stand before her small glass case, you will see a modest gray pigeon, one wooden leg, and a medal pinned to her chest. You might feel, as many do, an impossible weight in that room, because the story isn't really about a pigeon. It's about the quiet, colossal courage that lives inside the smallest things, the messages we don't give up on, the distances we cross when everything in us is broken, the way hope sometimes arrives on broken wings, covered in blood, and refusing to die. We remember the generals and the monuments, but history is always carried by the ones who fly in the smoke with nothing but a thin piece of paper and a will that cannot be explained. This bird flew for 194 men. She flew for the ones who couldn't. So when you look at her in a museum, you are looking at the proof that heroism doesn't need to be human, it just needs to be understood.